In this video, we're going to try to figure out what 1/2 plus 1/3 is equal to. And like always, I encourage you to pause this video and try to figure it out on your own. All right, now let's work through this together. And it might be helpful to visualize 1/2 and 1/3. So this is a visualization of 1/2. If you view this entire bar as a whole, then we have shaded in half of it. And if you wanted to visualize 1/3, it looks like that. So you could view this as this half plus this gray third here. What is that going to be equal to? Now, one of the difficult things is we know how to add if we have the same denominator. So if we had a certain number of halves here and a certain number of halves here, well, then we would know how many halves we have here. But here we're trying to add halves to thirds. So how do we do that? Well, we try to set up a common denominator. Now, what do we mean by a common denominator? Well, what if we could express this quantity and this quantity in terms of some other denominator? And a good way to think about it is there a multiple of 2 and 3? And it's simplest when you use the least common multiple. And the least common multiple of 2 and 3 is 6. So can we express 1/2 in terms of sixths? And can we express 1/3 in terms of sixths? So let me just start with 1 over 2, and I made this little fraction bar a little bit longer because you'll see why in a second. Well, if I want to express it in terms of sixths, to go from halves to sixths, I would have to multiply the denominator by 3. But if I want to multiply the denominator by 3 and not change the value of the fraction, I have to multiply the numerator by 3 as well. And to see why that makes sense, think about this. So this, what we have in green, is exactly what we had before. But now by multiplying the numerator and the denominator by 3, I've expressed it into sixths. So notice, I have 6 times as many divisions of the whole bar. And the green part, which you could view as the numerator, I now have 3 times as many. So these are now sixths. So I now have 3/6 instead of 1/2. So this is the same thing as 3 over 6. And I want to add that, or if I want to add this to what? Well, how do I express 1/3 in terms of sixths? Well, the way that I could do that, it's 1 over 3. I would want to take each of these thirds and make them into 2 sections. So to go from thirds to sixths, I'd multiply the denominator by 2, but I'd also be multiplying the numerator by 2. And to see why that makes sense, notice this shaded in gray part is exactly what we have here. But now we took each of these sections and we made them into 2 sections. So you multiply the numerator and the denominator by 2. Instead of thirds, instead of 3 equal sections, we now have 6 equal sections. That's what the denominator times 2 did. Instead of shading in just one of them, I now have shaded in 2 of them because that one thing that I shaded has now turned into 2 sections. And that's what multiplying the numerator by 2 does. And so this is the same thing as 3/6 plus, this is going to be 2/6. Then you can see it here. This is 1/6, 2/6. And now that everything is in terms of sixths, what is it going to be? Well, it's going to be a certain number of sixths. If I have 3 of something plus 2 of that something, well, it's going to be 5 of that something. In this case, the something is sixths. So it's going to be 5/6. I have trouble saying that. And you could visualize it right over here. This is 3 of the sixths, 1, 2, 3, plus 2 of the sixths. 1, 2 gets us to 5/6. But you could also view it as this green part was the original half, and this gray part was the original 1/3. But to be able to compute it, we expressed both of them in terms of sixths.